The truck was parked on the side of a dirt road. It was deep in the mountains of rural Oklahoma. The kind of place where you don't see another car for hours. It was October 2009. A deer hunter stumbled upon the white pickup. It was locked, and it looked abandoned. He didn't think much of it at first, but a few days later, he passed it again. Still there, untouched. That's when he called the police. Inside the truck, they found a family's life, or what was left of it. There was a wallet, a purse, car keys still in the ignition. There was a GPS, cell phones, and about $32,000 in cash stuffed in a bank bag. On the backseat was a dog. She was shivering and hungry, but alive. Her name was Maisie. The family's daughter had named her, but the family was gone. Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madyson. They had vanished. This wasn't just a case of a family getting lost. The scene was too strange. Why would anyone abandon their truck with their dog, their money, and their phones inside? People who are lost try to call for help. People who are running from something usually take their money. Nothing made sense. It was the beginning of one of the most bizarre and unsettling mysteries in Oklahoma's history. The question wasn't just where they went, it was what happened to them. And as investigators looked deeper into the Jamison family, the questions only got stranger. The Jamisons lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma. It's a small town. Bobby was 44. Sherilyn was 40. Madyson was just 6 years old. They weren't a typical family. They were a bit reclusive. They kept to themselves. Friends and family said they had been acting strangely for months before they disappeared. Bobby had been in a bad car accident years earlier. It left him with chronic pain. He was often tired and irritable. He couldn't work a regular job. His father had recently died, and there was a contentious legal battle over the inheritance. Bobby felt his father had been a con man and had threatened him. He'd even told his pastor he was worried about his father's ghost haunting him. Well, Sherilyn had her own struggles. She suffered from bipolar disorder. She was deeply religious, but also had an interest in what she called witchcraft. She owned a copy of the Satanic Bible, but friends said it was just for research, to understand the other side. She wrote long, rambling letters and journal entries about spirits and demons. She believed their house was haunted. She claimed spirits, sometimes good, sometimes evil, lived on their roof and spoke to Madyson. And then there was Madyson, a bright little girl caught in the middle of it all. She reportedly talked to a spirit girl named Emily in their house. Before they vanished, Sherilyn had told a friend that Madyson had been talking to the ghosts of 2 children who had died in the house long ago. The family was preparing for a big change. They wanted to get away. They were looking to buy a 40-acre plot of land in the San Juan Mountains. They wanted to live off the grid, in a storage container they had on their property that they planned to convert into a home. The day they disappeared, October 8th, 2009, they were supposed to be scouting that land. They packed up the truck and drove towards the mountains. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. The discovery of the truck kicked off a massive search. Hundreds of volunteers, police on foot, on horseback, and in helicopters scoured the rugged terrain. The mountains were dense with trees and riddled with caves and old mine shafts. It was a difficult place to search. Day after day, they found nothing. No footprints. No torn clothing. No sign of a struggle. It was as if the family had been lifted right out of their truck and into the sky. The evidence from the truck itself was just as puzzling. The police found Sherilyn's phone. On it was a single photograph. It was taken the day they disappeared. It showed Madyson standing with her arms crossed, looking unhappy, almost defiant. It was a strange photo for a family outing. It didn't look like a happy memory being captured. It felt tense. Investigators looked into the family's background. They found out about the large sum of cash. It came from a settlement, but carrying that much cash into the remote woods seemed odd. They also learned the family was severely malnourished. Security footage from their home, taken the day they left, showed them moving back and forth from the house to the truck. They moved slowly, almost in a daze. They didn't speak to each other. They just packed in a robotic, trance-like state. It was chilling to watch. They looked like zombies, one officer said, gaunt and emotionless. The theory started flying immediately. The first and most obvious one was a drug deal gone wrong. The remote location, the large amount of cash, their emaciated appearance. It fit the profile of methamphetamine users. Police explored this theory hard. They even brought drug-sniffing dogs to the truck. The dogs gave a slight indication of drugs, but no actual drugs were ever found. The family had no known history of drug abuse. Friends and family swore they weren't involved in that world. But the possibility lingered. Maybe they stumbled upon a meth lab in the woods and saw something they shouldn't have. Another theory was that they were in a cult. Sherilyn's interest in witchcraft and her talk of spirits fueled this idea. On the side of the storage container they wanted to live in, someone had spray-painted strange messages. One read, Witches don't like it when their black cat is killed. Sherilyn had written a long, angry letter to her husband, which was found in the truck. It was 11 pages of accusations and bitterness. She called him a hermit and said she wanted a divorce. It read like a final, desperate message, but she never gave it to him. Was this the sign of a marriage falling apart? Or something darker? Was it a religious dispute that turned violent? Maybe they met a fringe group in the mountains. Then there was the murder-suicide theory. Perhaps Sherilyn, in a deep depression or a manic episode from her bipolar disorder, snapped. She had a .22 pistol with her. Maybe she shot Bobby and Madyson, then herself. It would explain the angry letter. But it didn't explain the location. Why walk miles into the woods to do it? And where was the gun? It was never found. More importantly, it didn't explain why they would leave their beloved dog, Maisie, to starve in the truck. Sherilyn adored that dog. It seemed out of character, even for someone in a mental health crisis. Some people thought they just got lost. They wandered off from the truck to explore the land they wanted to buy, got turned around, and succumbed to the element. It happens. The mountains are unforgiving. But again, it didn't fit the details. Why leave the phones and the GPS? Why leave the cash? Why abandon the dog? And the search was so extensive. It seemed unlikely that 3 bodies could have been missed so close to the truck. For 4 long years, there were no answers. The case went cold, the family's faces faded from the news. The mystery became a piece of local folklore, a ghost story told around campfires. The abandoned truck, the cache, the dog, the weird photo, it was the stuff of legend. For the Jamisons' family and friends, it was a constant, aching pain. Not knowing is its own kind of hell. Then, in November 2013, everything changed. A group of hunters were in the Samsbois Mountains, about 3 miles from where the Jamisons' truck had been found. They stumbled upon human remains. It was a partial skull. The police were called. They began a careful search of the area. Soon they found more bones, and more. They had found the Jamisons. The 3 bodies were lying side by side, face down on the ground. Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madyson. They were finally found, but the discovery only deepened the mystery. The condition of the remains made it nearly impossible to determine a cause of death. The bones were scavenged by animals and weathered by the elements. The medical examiner's official report was inconclusive. Cause of death undetermined. Manner of death undetermined, but there was one clue. A small, circular hole was found in the back of Bobby Jamison's skull. It was about the size of a .22 caliber bullet. The pathologist who examined it believed it was a gunshot wound. This pointed towards murder. If Bobby was shot, then it wasn't a case of getting lost. It was a homicide. However, other forensic experts who reviewed the case files disagreed. They argued the hole could have been caused by decomposition or animal activity. There was no clear consensus. It was a clue that led nowhere definitive. The position of the bodies was also strange. Face down, side by side. It didn't look like they had simply collapsed from exhaustion. It looked like they had been placed there. It felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. Who would do that? And why? With the discovery of the bodies, the old theories were re-examined. The murder-suicide theory seemed less likely. If Sherilyn had shot Bobby, then Madyson, then herself, the bodies would likely be in different positions. And the gun was still missing. It's hard to hide a gun after you've shot yourself. The drug deal theory gained more traction. A violent encounter in the woods. They were taken from their truck, marched 3 miles into the forest, and executed. It was brutal. It was possible. But police could never find a solid link between the Jamisons and the drug world. No informants came forward. No evidence ever surfaced. It was all speculation. The cult theory also remained. The strange positioning of the bodies fed into the idea of a ritualistic killing. Sherilyn's writings about spirits and her belief that their house was haunted took on a more sinister light. Had they fallen in with a dangerous group who promised them spiritual protection but delivered death instead? Or were they running from someone? In one of her final conversations, Sherilyn told her pastor she had seen her name written on a hit list in a satanic Bible she found. Was she paranoid, or was she telling the truth? There was also the possibility of a more personal motive. Someone they knew. The dispute over Bobby's father's estate was messy. Had he angered someone who came for revenge? There was also a man who had been living on their property as a handyman. He had a criminal record. The police looked at him, but he had an alibi. They couldn't connect him to the disappearance. The case is a tangled web of strange facts and disturbing possibilities. Every clue seems to contradict another. They seemed paranoid and scared, buying security systems and talking about ghosts. But they also drove into the middle of nowhere with a huge amount of cash. They looked malnourished and unwell, but they were planning a new life. They wrote angry letters, but seemed to stick together. Let's try to break it down. What do we actually know? We know they drove to that remote spot on purpose. They were there to look at land. We know they left their truck with almost everything they owned inside it, including their dog. This suggests they didn't plan to be gone for long, or that they left under duress. We know they were found 3 miles away, which is a long walk in that terrain. It would have taken them over an hour, maybe 2. We know they were found lying face down next to each other. And we know there was a suspicious hole in Bobby's skull. Now let's think about what each theory fails to explain. The getting lost theory doesn't explain the hole in Bobby's head, the positioning of the bodies, or why they left their phones and dog. It's the simplest explanation, but it ignores the strangest facts of the case. The murder-suicide theory doesn't explain the missing gun, the 3-mile walk, or the neat arrangement of the bodies. It also struggles to explain why Sherilyn would harm Madyson, whom she loved dearly, or abandon her dog. The drug deal theory explains the cash and the potential for violence. It could explain why they were executed, but it doesn't explain the family's lack of drug history, and why would drug dealers march them 3 miles into the woods? Usually, such encounters are quick and brutal, not a long march. It also doesn't explain any of the bizarre spiritual stuff, like the talk of ghosts and witches. The cult theory explains the weird spiritual elements and the possibly ritualistic placement of the bodies. But it's based on very little concrete evidence. There's no proof of any cult operating in the area. It relies on interpreting Sherilyn's writings and beliefs in the most sinister way possible. It's a compelling story, but it's just a story without more proof. The truth is, no single theory ties up all the loose ends. The case of the Jamison family is like a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and the other half belonging to different puzzles altogether. You can arrange the pieces one way, and it looks like a drug deal. Arrange them another way, and it looks like a mental breakdown. Arrange them a third way, and it looks like something out of a horror movie. Maybe the answer is a combination of things. Maybe the family was already in a fragile state. Bobby was in constant pain. Sherilyn was struggling with her mental health. They were both losing a lot of weight. They were paranoid, believing their house was haunted and that people were after them. Perhaps they were experiencing a shared delusion, a folie à deux, or in this case, a folie à trois. A shared psychosis, where the whole family detached from reality. In this state, they drive into the mountains. Maybe they weren't thinking clearly. Maybe they saw something they thought was a threat, a person or a spirit. They grab the bag of cash, thinking they need to run, but in their panic state, they forget the phones and the dog. They walk into the woods, getting more and more disoriented. They are already weak from malnutrition. The cold sets in. They huddle together for warmth. One by one, they succumb to hypothermia. This explains why they left the truck and why they were found together. It's a tragic accident amplified by their poor mental and physical health. But what about the hole in Bobby's skull? That's the piece that doesn't fit this theory. If it was a bullet hole, then someone else was there, someone who shot Bobby. If that's the case, what happened to Sherilyn and Madyson? Did the killer just leave them to die of exposure? It seems unlikely. And if the killer shot all 3, why was only one hole found? The condition of the remains makes it impossible to know for sure. The other skulls were too damaged. This is the central point of frustration in the Jamison case. For every plausible explanation, there is a stubborn fact that refutes it. It's a case built on contradictions. Let's reconsider the people involved. Bobby was in a dispute with his own father, who he believed had mob ties. He had filed a lawsuit against him. Just before he disappeared, Bobby told his pastor he was afraid for his life. Not from ghosts, but from his family. Could this have been a hit? A professional killing made to look like something else? It's possible. It would explain the gunshot. A killer could have forced them from their truck at gunpoint and marched them into the woods. But again, why the 3-mile walk, and why leave the money behind? A professional hitman would likely not leave $32,000 in cash sitting in the truck. Let's look at Sherilyn's side. She had a sister she was close to, but she also had a strained relationship with her ex-husband, Madyson's biological father. However, he was quickly cleared by police. Her writings are the most compelling and confusing part of her story. Was she just a woman with a deep, unconventional faith trying to make sense of her world? Or was she losing her grip on reality? The hate letter to Bobby found in the truck is disturbing. But many couples have arguments and write things they don't mean. Was it just a moment of anger, or was it a sign of a deeper rot in the family? The sheriff who led the investigation for years, Israel Beauchamp, eventually came to his own conclusion. He believes it was a murder-suicide. He thinks Sherilyn's mental health deteriorated to a breaking point. He theorizes that she shot Bobby in the back of the head. Then, somehow, she and Madyson died of exposure, or she killed Madyson and then herself. He admits the theory has holes, like the missing gun and the location, but for him it made the most sense out of a set of impossible scenarios. It was the internal threat, not an external one. But many people, including family members, strongly disagree. They believe the family was murdered. They point to the hole in Bobby's skull as definitive proof. They believe the family's strange behavior was a result of fear. They were being threatened by someone, and their paranoia was justified. They were running from a real danger, not an imaginary one. So who killed the Jamison family? The honest answer is we don't know. And we may never know. The physical evidence is too degraded. The witnesses are too few. The family's own state of mind in their final days is too opaque. It's a story that stays with you because it feels so fundamentally wrong. Families don't just walk into the woods and disappear. They don't leave their money and their dog behind. Their bodies aren't found years later, arranged in a neat line. It violates our sense of how the world should work. The legacy of the Jamison case is one of questions. Was it drugs, a cult, a family feud, or a tragic mental breakdown? Was there a killer who got away with it, or were the killers, the Jamisons themselves, victims of their own minds? Every detail is a breadcrumb leading down a different path. The cache points to drugs. The Bible points to a cult. The lawsuit points to a family hit. The letter points to a domestic dispute. The trance, state points to a shared delusion. It's a choose-your-own adventure of tragedy, and none of the endings make complete sense. The story is not just about the Jamisons, it's about the wilderness, both outside and inside. The physical wilderness of the Oklahoma mountains, which can swallow people whole. And the wilderness of the human mind, which can be an even more dangerous and unpredictable place. What happened on that dirt road in October 2009? What was going through their minds as they packed their truck in that strange, silent way? What did Madyson see in that last haunting photograph? Did they walk into the woods willingly? Were they forced? Were they running towards something or away from something? These questions hang in the air unanswered. The case is officially closed, but the mystery is very much alive. It's a reminder that sometimes the world presents us with a story that has no clear heroes or villains, no simple explanation, and no satisfying conclusion. Sometimes, people just vanish into the woods, leaving behind a truck full of money, a beloved dog, and a mystery that may never be solved. The silence that followed their disappearance is the only answer we have, and it tells us nothing at all. The only certainty is the loss. A father, a mother, and a little girl are gone. And the mountains keep their secrets.